Hey, good morning to those of you out on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm glad you're here for another day of training in the federal sales market. Today, we're going to be talking about how to get in any agency door to tell your story. And so this is kind of a different way that I'm tackling a similar topic, right? Business development, about telling your story, right? You want to get in the agency to tell your story. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, I want to just give a tip that's outside this particular day's training for those of you who were here early and on time to say thanks. So I wanted to talk to you briefly about the difference between skills and talent. Sometimes we often look at another person and go, wow, they're so talented, or they were just born good at sales, for example. You might look at me and say, oh, he's so talented at talking, right? Talking out loud. But let me just use that one as an example, right? I grew up in a household with 12 people, 2 parents, 10 kids. That was my norm. I was the number 9 of 10 kids. So I was my twin brother and I were actually 9 and 10. And I grew up in that household. Every night at dinner, there'd be 12 of us sitting around the table. And you would learn to have conversations, constantly pushing in. There's a reason we are who we are. And I believe a big part of it's environment. And so my environment growing up was around an environment where not only was I comfortable talking to a crowd of 10 or 12, right? But also you were constantly being bombarded with, what's your point? What's your point? And so in my family, it's actually a really rude thing that we learned as we're getting older that we did to each other, but somebody was trying to tell a story and it's like, what's your point? I don't have a point. I'm just telling a story. And so through that, I was able to kind of continue my skills. So I got good at telling jokes at the table, just like every one of my brothers and sisters, telling stories. What'd you do? But you're around a bigger audience. And then, so I wasn't born with a talent to speak and be able to do these daily lives, for example. But I was able to develop that skill as a kid growing up in my house. And then as I moved forward, just the different jobs I had experience that enabled me to practice it. Then I was really active in an organization called Toastmasters. I was already a good speaker, comfortable speaking before a couple of hundred people in an audience. And I joined Toastmasters in, I think, 1999. And in 99, I spent 10 plus years, 99, 2009, at least 10 years in Toastmasters, going through the ranks, going back to the fundamentals of speaking, right? Of course, they try to teach you not to say uhs and ums or something, but also just this ability to speak to an audience, to organize your thoughts, to look here, look there, that kind of stuff. And so I developed this skill, and government contracting is that same type of thing. And I want you to really keep this in mind. There's no talent in government contracting. It's not like somebody who's charismatic is going to come into government contracting and beat you or me out of an opportunity, right? It doesn't work that way. In government contracting, really the best company that shows up with the best price for the government is the one that wins, right? I simplify that. But what I want you to understand from what I'm telling you here is that skills can be developed. And every day I come here trying to teach you somehow or another a part of the process for success in the government contracting world. And in particular, we're talking about skill sets. I'm going to teach you today skill sets about getting in an agency door, right? And the way skills work are you have to learn them, and then you have to remember them because you forgot half of what you heard or something, right? So you have to keep learning them. Then you have to practice them. If you're trying to get into an agency door, try here, bam, the door's closed. Oh, well, we'll try again. And you have to try it 100 times, 1,000 times before that skill begins to get to a certain level in you that other people look at you and go, wow, she was born just good at government sales. It's like, no, I'm not. I was horrible at it. I hated doing it. But then I just developed the skills. And that's what I want you to keep in mind as we move forward, is that you really can develop the skills to achieve the goals that you want. And what I try to bring to you each day is a reminder of what skills you might want to be practicing on. So I hope that tip was helpful for you. I'm going to turn off this little caption because sometimes I forget. And we're going to dive in and get started. Today's topic, right? How to get into any agency and tell your story. I often hear people express frustration about getting into federal agency doors. If I could just meet the buyer, the program office buyer, I'm sure when they heard my story, they would buy from me, right? Have you ever heard somebody say that? Or have you ever said that yourself? And I get what you're saying. I get what they're saying, right? Is that I just want to get in and tell my story. Small business specialists, contracting officers, these are not buyers, right? No matter what technicality people say, they're not the buyers. They're just part of the buyer's team. But the buyer is the person with the need. And that's what I want to talk to you about. That's what we're going to cover today, is how to get to the person with the need, what I call focuses of receptivity. Focuses of dissatisfaction. Watch my other training and you'll understand why I just made that mistake. But the program office person, they're the focuses of dissatisfaction. They have the need. And so we're going to dive into that. If you don't know who I am, I'm Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live, where I teach processes and procedures for you to have success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process, we achieve predictable results. And I know that's what you want. Before we get started, do me a favor, help buyers remember who you are. Put your company name into the chat, 2 or 3 words that tell me what your core competency is. Don't try to use too many words, right? Make it easy for me to remember your company. Somebody had this long one that I keep remembering. They had a long one and then they changed it to workforce, or they actually have the long one still a little bit in there, but they're like, one word, workforce. And that's always in my head when I'm looking at other, working with other customers or digging into agencies and I see something related to workforce. I'm like, oh, damn. Right. So I want to do that for you. I want your buyers to do the same thing. And I want the people in this community to remember who you are. Joe, I appreciate you putting down that you're open to connecting. For the rest of you, if you're open to connecting, that's a good thing to put in. Let people know that you're willing to, accept a LinkedIn connection to slowly get to know each other. So go ahead and put that in the chat. And then as we go along, that community, the chat is your community. Be engaged as much as you want in there, right? We're not selling, but definitely build a relationship. Networking is about beginning that process of somebody knowing, liking, and trusting you. And it starts with just chatting a little bit in there. If you see something I say that you like, in particular, you can say something about it in chat, which might start a couple of people having dialogue with you. Okay, last thing is, as we go forward, I'm going to give you sometimes things I want you to put into the chat. So do me a favor, engage with me, put them in the chat when I ask, and it'll let me know that you're tracking on what I'm saying. Most importantly, that's what I want, is to know that what I'm saying is reaching you and it's making sense. So I'm going to do 2 parts to today's training. Today, I'm going to be first just talking to you, trying to share a little bit about today's topic on getting into any agency so you can tell your story. But then I want to share my screen for a little bit and show you how I track the research material and how I track the buyers I'm trying to reach. So I'll show you a little bit of that. And as much time as I have, I'm going to expand on that because I really want you to see it. It's a great tip, I think, for you to be able to take away from today. So let's just talk about what you might be experiencing. It's definitely what I see other people experiencing, and maybe you're experiencing similar things, right? Is you're trying to get into an agency, but you don't particularly know who the buyers are, the program office name, the actual people, things like that. And so you're at this stoppage, right? You want to sell to the Air Force, let's say, and the small business specialist, but you feel like you just don't know anybody else. I don't know who to go to. And this is not that exercise that you sometimes hear, and we sometimes say, go to FPDS and go to USA Spending and learn who's buying what you sell. That's just one research tool, but it's not really helping you find who buys what you sell, because even the information that there is still at a high level, which I'll show you when I share my screen. But maybe you're struggling with not knowing who to actually talk to. That is that focus of dissatisfaction. Or if you do know, some of these offices, you actually can't reach any of these people to tell your story. I know if I could just tell my story to Naval X, or if I could just tell my story to LCMC in the Air Force, if I could tell it to them, it would resonate with them and they would see it and pull me in and want to have more conversations, and I could be seen as a subject matter expert. But because I can't get in the door, I'm at a complete block. This goes to my third thing you might experience, is that you're just being blocked by gatekeepers, right? You keep trying to go in, let's say a small business specialist. Just because small business specialists are out there, and I talk a lot about them, and I advocate that you should be contacting them, it doesn't mean all of them are great for us. And that's just the way it works. And it's also the same when the buyer looks at us. Just because there's 300,000 small businesses out here does not mean all of us are good vendors, right? And so go look at my bell curve and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But sometimes when you run into a small business specialist, they're the gatekeeper. They block you. They're like, I don't know if I'm going to get you in here. I know of one small business specialist. I like using him as an example often, is Matt Burkett. And I can use others and many others. But Matt, one of my favorite things is he's not a a gatekeeper in a way that he's trying to keep you out of Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane, but he wants to know, what are you trying to get to? How can he help you get to the right program office? And then how can he prep you so that when you do have the meeting, you have success in there? So an example is, I remember him making an introduction once to the CTO out there at Crane. And one thing he made sure that this company knew was that the CTO did not have any budget authority. They did not spend money. Their office's job primarily was to advise everybody else who spent money. It was still a very good meeting because you get in there and you can tell your story. And if he likes what he's hearing, he can move you on. But not everybody's like Matt, right? Sometimes they're a gatekeeper and they just block you. They just won't let you in. Oh, you have to bring everything through me. And that's just crazy, right? And then sometimes it's what I would call almost worse, because you don't see this happening to you, is maybe you're being blocked by nice people. They don't really know their agency. They're nice. They want to help you, but they don't know their agency at all. And I'm going to talk to you in a second about how you should know the agency that you want to go into better than 90% of the people who are working in that agency, whether it's EPA or Navy or education. You should know them better. And sometimes when you're working with a really nice person in the government, they're just blocking you because their lack of knowledge. And there's ways to get around it. I've done other training talking about how do you help these people help you. Fundamentally, it's a process of training them, right? I'm not going to go into it too much today, but really, if you're being blocked by somebody who's nice but just doesn't know the agency, teach them who you want to reach, and then they'll be able to help you perhaps. Okay, so that maybe is what you're experiencing. It's definitely what I see out when I'm talking to other small businesses and that I try to help with. And so where you want to go and what my training today is about is really knowing exactly who you want to hear your story. So by the time you get to the end of today's training, you should have a good idea of what I'm recommending that you can do to know that actual buyer, right? And be invited to come in and talk with these program office buyers, not just once, but like repeatedly coming back. And this is my third tip on this, is that you should be seen as a strategic advisor, a trusted advisor to these people, where you have a strategic relationship that you can call them over and over again, right? Not pestering, but let's use, if you're in the cloud services, the Army cloud, a guy who's in charge of the cloud for Army, his name's Paul Puckett, right? Imagine having a strategic relationship with you, that he values what you share, what you talk about, your insights on the cloud, et cetera. And so you reach out, you slowly build a relationship with him. He knows, likes, and trusts you now. Now, whenever you want to come back throughout the next year, the next 5 years, as long as Paul's in that role, you've got a strategic relationship that he's willing to talk with you, because he knows that when he talks with you, it's going to be good for the Army as well. So that's where I want to take you, is how do you begin to get to that stage? If that's what you want, if you'd like to sit there and know how to get into agencies and it all kind of settles in on strategic relationships, do me a favor, let me know you're tracking on this by putting strategic relationships into the chat. Okay, so there's a 90-day plan that I recommend for you to pick any new agency that you want to get into and get in and be able to tell your story within 90 days, right? You can certainly try to accelerate this much faster, but if you're living in quadrant 2, not quadrant 1, and go follow another training I have, but quadrant 2 is important but not urgent. Quadrant 1 are activities that are important and urgent. And so if you've got an opportunity that's coming up in 30 days, well, that's not what I'm trying to help you with today. I'm trying to help you with, you want to get into the Army long term, this month, this year, next 5 years, right? If that's what you're looking to do, then give yourself 90 days to start getting the ball rolling. And that's what I want to teach you. Everything I'm going to teach you today, you could accelerate down and try to go really fast. I just don't recommend it because you kind of cut corners here. But the first thing in the 90-day plan is you want to make sure that you have company goals. Yesterday, I did training about how to set a strategy for 2023. And in there, the first thing I said is you have to determine the revenue goals you have for next year. And so as you move forward and you want to get into an agency and tell a story, if you can create a strategic plan for the next year that has the revenue goals you want, and then the target agencies you're going after, and the core competency that you sell, services, products, then you will have everything you need to be able to start moving forward and doing next step is research, which I'll talk about that in a second. But when you set a company goal, you're looking at high level agency descriptions. I want to get into the Army, for example. It's like, okay, that's high enough. At the company level, that's good enough. We want to get into the Army next year. You want to make $5 million or $10 million next year. By the way, if you're not making money, don't set these high level goals, set realistic goals. But when you set a goal like that, it helps you kind of understand, well, where would I find that kind of money? Where are they spending? If I want to get $5 million more per year next year from the Air Force, where are they spending it? Where that's a realistic goal for me to be able to expect to get it from them. So an example is if I'm in cyber, I might say 16th Air Force. They're definitely spending that much money. Now I got to figure out later how to go deeper into it. I'll show you that in a second. But so anyways, first step on the 90-day plan is to make sure you have a solid goal about how much money do you want to make next year, how much sales, where are you going to make it, which agency, and then what are you selling, right? So those three things, you should be able to do that today. It shouldn't take you longer than a day to knock those three things down. And I don't care if you're a $1 billion company or if you're a $1 million company, it's the same thing. If you're in business and you don't know those three things, then your entire company should stop moving for 1 second and settle on that, because when you do, it will become kind of your North Star plan for everything else that you do. So number 2 on the 90-day plan, and it's the first major effort, is research. And I'm going to show you a lot of the ways I capture the research I do. But what I mean by research is going in and understanding who you're going after. So let me go back to the Navy, which is my kind of go-to agency. I chose the agency, not Department of Defense, but Department of Navy. So this is Marine Corps and Navy. When I go in, part of the research I'm going to do is to understand how is it organized. And I'm going to show you in a second how I capture all that. So how is it organized? The second thing I want to do is to start grabbing strategic plans. What are they saying they want to do? If you're not familiar with the Government Accountability Office, GAO, they put out reports about agencies to say, hey, here's the top challenges those agencies have that we're telling them they need to fix. Sometimes within an organization, you have the OIG, the Office of Inspector General. They have similar type reports saying, hey, here's management challenges that must be addressed. So you have these two kind of outside entities looking into an agency, but then you also have the agency looking at itself. There's annual reports. And so as we go into 2023, they'll have a report for 2022. What did we accomplish? What didn't we get done that we wanted to get done? What are some of the challenges we face? What's our strategic plan for 2023? They'll have a strategic plan. Sometimes they'll have a business operations type plan, which is basically, if the strategic plan is more blue sky thinking, hey, here's all the things we want to do, then a business operation type plan, something similar to that, an action plan, will say, well, how are we actually going to get this done? So first they say kind of what we want done, and then how are we going to get it done? When you research and start gathering all this information, it helps you really understand the customer you're going after. But also at the same time, it helps you understand how is it structured? Who are the offices? What are the offices? What are the offices that are working on what I sell? Right? It's not necessarily who's buying what I sell, but who's working on it. And I'll show you in a minute what I'm talking about there. I'm gonna leave myself 10 minutes. But so research goes into that, and then the next part of researching is really understanding are there industry decks out there? So I talked about strategic documents. But often agencies, Navy, for example, they'll put out briefings all across the country at different events they go to. You have to begin to identify the organizations or the events that the Navy has, for example, and track on that data that's coming out. If you have small business specialists, they might not be good at getting you into the program office, but they could be really good at telling you what events are out there that the Navy's doing, especially what industry day events, because often they're engaged in it. So when you start gathering this material, research is actually reading it, and it's going to be hundreds of pages. I'm not here to tell you you can make $1 million or $5 or $10 million if you're not willing to put the effort in to understand your customer. And the cool thing about the federal government that no commercial customer does even remotely is the federal government tells you exactly full transparency about their agency, about their goals, about their challenges, right? Within reason, but way more than any commercial customer. You can't go over to Walmart and they say, oh, here's everything about us, right? And so when the government is putting this out, they're doing it because they want us to research them. They want us to understand them. When we write proposals, we should be communicating that we understand it. Okay, so 90-day plan. First thing you need to do is have your company goals. Second thing you need to do is research, that research activity. Third thing is targeting. And targeting, I've done a whole separate training on this, But targeting is about finding the people you want to reach out to. And I'll show you examples of how you can get started with that. There's many ways you can do this. You can do this on LinkedIn. You can do this within a website for the agency. And those briefing decks I talked about, you could do it in there. And then you can also do it with relationships, calling people, talking to people, and learning. But basically targeting, you want to build a list of 100 people, not 5 or 10 people, 100 people that you're going to begin to reach out to. Main reason is because some of these people won't get back to you. Some will, some won't, right? So some people will get back to you, some won't. And when you have 100 people, you'll get enough traction that you find the people who are willing to talk with you to allow you to get in the agency, to allow you to tell your story. Because again, that's the whole purpose. And then the last step in the 90-day program, and I'm going to skip out of talking about it too deep here, but it's outreach, right? So you're going to do research, then you're going to do targeting, then you're going to do outreach. And outreach means beginning to engage on LinkedIn, asking for an intro call, whatever you're doing, you're trying to learn more about that agency. So I know I'm blowing through this really fast, but I wanted to switch over and share my screen for a second to show you how you really can do this and grab a lot of information. So if you're tracking on everything I've been saying so far, just put in the chat, research rocks. Although I just noticed chat for a second, I see a lot of you putting in things like targeting and outreach, which is awesome too. But research rocks. I don't think anything's better than research for what I try to get done in this particular phase. But okay, so let me share my screen. Check my time. Got 9 minutes. Okay, so I use this tool called MindMeister. If you'd like me to send you a link, I can. I actually set up an affiliation thing, so the GovCon Chamber gets a little donation if you sign up. It doesn't cost you any more money, but it throws a couple dollars towards the chamber, which is always good, because if you don't know this, the chamber is fully funded by us. We're not government sponsored, large business sponsored. We're a self-funded organization, and so anything that can help is always good. Okay, so when I look at an agency and I'm doing research, and this is the Department of Navy, I line up a couple of key top categories that I try to pull the data into. And so here you can see the two services that are under the Department of Navy are Navy and Marine Corps. Over on the right-hand side, I try to track just the top contract vehicles that are out there. This is important to let me know where are opportunities dropping. And also I can find the contract holders, and these are potential teammates for me to pursue. So that's a good group of research for me to have. And then top vendors, right? Who's the top largest, who's the top hub zones, top 8A firms, et cetera, in my space. And so I do the research to find them, put them in, then I begin to put people's names on that. And so that's what I do in those groups. In the middle, often you will find agencies organize themselves in different ways. And so the reason we have PEOs here, program executive offices, is because I'm working with customers who are all basically professional services and IT service companies. And a lot of what they're trying to go after and the people they want to talk to fall under program executive offices. And so this organization, the Department of Navy, is so huge that there's a lot of traction going on. But this is a really important area, and I'll come back to that in a second. But if you look over on the Navy, right, I track on the Navy. I just start breaking down their major commands and how it's laid out. I can go into NAV SUP, right? NAV War down here, Naval Information Warfare Center. That's the IT place. That's where I want to play, and I know I want to play there. But I also want to understand NAV SUP, right? Is there any play for me as an IT company, cyber company, whatever, in here? Well, I know there is, right? They're not the major spender, but they do have things. So an example is they have this business center, and I can see they do data analytics. As an example, if I'm a data company, then I'm going to go in there, right? If I'm a cybersecurity company, I'd still go in there and talk to them about, how data is protected and how I can protect it or whatever. But by doing this, I can begin to understand which of the Navy organizations, the lower commands, do I want to go after? Does this take some time? Yes, it does. That's why I said 90 days. But within 90 days, you will become smarter about your agency. I will become smarter about the Navy than, again, like I said, 90% of the people in the Navy. And just think about your own company or companies you've worked for. When they get to be 50 people or above, how much does each person know about the entire company, right? They tend to know about, I'm a proposal manager and I know the proposal section, but I don't know about the financial office, the HR department. I don't know about who's running our IT, the computers just work, right? So the bigger the organization gets, the more a person is focused on their particular area. In the Navy, a captain in the Navy might be on a ship They're in command, they're taking charge, but really, how much do they know about nav sup or nav fac or any of these other things, right? They're in a small area, and it's one of the things you want to keep in mind, because this is what can help you become that trusted advisor to the Navy or to the Department of Education or whoever, is when you take the time to really understand their organization, how this fits with this type thing. Okay, so let me bring you over to the Program Executive Office. So in here, there's a whole bunch of PEOs is what they're called, right? And so I'm tracking on who they are, and I've got links that I can go research them farther. So that arrow is a link. I got little descriptions for each one if I wanted to read it. But these, I'm less concerned about NAVC and NAVAIR as an IT company, because I'm like, well, most of these PEOs are a little bit beyond me. So once I get traction in the Navy, once I get experience under NAVAIR, which I'll show you in a second, then I might expand to NAVC and NAVAIR. But let's say 2023, I'm just going to focus on the PEOs that are in NAVAIR. And in particular, I might just focus on the top two, right? PEO MLB or PEO digital. And by doing this kind of research and laying it out, I can begin to understand how the Navy fits. And so the program executive offices, I know that they fit under the Department of Navy. They report directly up there, but they're kind of dotted line over to NAVAIR for the ones I'm pointing to. But when I look in here, I can see, I give myself a little synopsis, but also I can keep coming down, right? I'm in NAVAIR's PEO Digital Program Executive Office for digital technology down here in their focus areas. And because of my research, I know that this is basically a brand new way for the Navy to look at this stuff. But now I look at Zero Trust, Agile and DevOps if you're a software development firm, right? Microsoft 365, Hunter, if you and Thurman and other SharePoint people are on here, right? I'm able to see this. My next level of research, my team and I, our next level of research for our customers is to go, okay, let's line up a person for every one of these Zero Trust, Agile, et cetera, so that we can begin to reach out to them. An example of that is we started doing this already on the portfolios, but if I look at cyber operations services as an example, and if I just hover above this for a second, it's telling me that it's delivering the technical solutions to manage data and cyber resources, et cetera. If I'm a cyber company, that sounds good. That sounds like me. And so when we can, we attach relevant documents. We don't store them in some folder somewhere else. We keep them here in the org chart, so it allows us to connect. In fact, when we find people, we actually put the links to their LinkedIn profile. So we're able to do research, we're able to do outreach, all of it through this tool is $10 a month, I think. But if I click on this, and it comes up really, really, really fast, you can see one of the things I just want to point out is right here, I'm interested in cybersecurity, and here's two people's names. Instantly, I'm able to find two people's names down there, and I can learn more about this organization, what they do, how they break it down, right? They have service teams. What this tells me instantly when I see service teams, and I don't know for sure I'm correct, my research is going to tell me, but I can look to Sarah and Daniel and go, these two are probably leaders over a bunch of other leaders in those service areas that I just showed you down below here, right? Service teams. And so I will begin to build people's names there. All of this I'm trying to show you is about research, right? This idea of having a good understanding about the agency you want to go after, researching them, grabbing as many documents as you can, reading them, and begin to build a relevant picture, and especially how it relates to what you want to get done. So hopefully that all made sense. If you like what you just saw there, put mind mapping into the chat, because that's what I did. That's mind mapping. You see me do it here all the time. A circle with lines. It's a way of looking at information as just mind mapping. And I love it because not to go too far down the wrong path, but when you mind map like this, you don't have constraints of lines that you can only go so high and so low if you're looking at lined paper. But if you got a big whiteboard, or if you got a mind map like I just showed you, you could just keep adding more and more, and your ability to understand your agency gets so much more. And so you saw that cybersecurity example. I have just identified two people who were like 5 levels down into a program office that I want for my customers doing cybersecurity. So now I can get in and tell the story. Hopefully that makes sense. You know, there's a lot of information there. I want to make sure I end on time, but keep in mind, you know, the 90-day plan, set your company goals. do your research, then start targeting, finding the right people, and then begin to do outreach, first engagement on LinkedIn so they know you, and then request an in-person meeting to do an intro call. When you do that, you'll find that you'll be able to start getting into agencies and you'll be able to tell your story. If you found today's training valuable and helpful to you, do me a favor, throw thanks in the chat. And remember, government contracting, it's not a secret, it's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.